video is sponsored by the Latham Agency. When you're tired of struggling with not knowing how to design beautiful content for your brand, we will be here. Book a free consultation. Call at thelathamagency.com.
Guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Candice Latham, and this channel is all about helping you become the hero of your finances. I believe that you can raise your net worth, and I also believe that you can be the first person in your family to break the cycle of poverty. Now, today I have a special guest with us. I'm going to read her bio, and then we're going to jump right into the interview. Before I read her bio, if you have not hit the subscribe button to this channel, I would love for you to join the family. And I also have a free Excel net worth tracker for you to download, so make sure you grab that in the description box below. All right, back to our special guest. Justine is the founder of a real estate education site called Live with Plum. It aims to be the home buying guide for the modern woman, helping women build wealth through real estate. The site was inspired by her personal experience buying in New York City and seeing that there were very little resources available to help female home buyers. She lives in New York City but hails from Singapore. Without further ado, let's bring on Justine. Welcome, Justine. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, me too. Real estate just always makes me so excited. So I'm just definitely happy to have you here as an expert to, teach us some things.
I'll try and do what I can.
All right. So you bought your first home in 2014. Did you have anyone in your immediate family who had bought their homes before?
Yeah. So I actually, part of my story is that I grew up in a family that did a lot of real estate. My parents had regular jobs. I'm one of 4 kids. They were both the first in their families to go to college. So they were working really hard, when I was born. But real estate was always really important to them. My mom worked in commercial real estate, and so she really understood the value of it, and then started, buying houses on the side when I was growing up. So I moved a lot because she would buy a place, and then she'd be like, okay, we're moving, we're going to buy another place. So we moved there, and then she would sell it or rent it out. But I think for me, when you're a kid, you kind of just that's your normal, that's what you know, that's what you see. And so for me, buying real estate was always kind of my normal. And so when I, graduated school and all of that and started making money, it was always very natural for me to want to buy a place and see it as a wealth building tool. So that's a long way of saying yes. Long way of saying yes.
That's awesome that you grew up and having that knowledge and that experience and that being your environment.
Yeah, I think, more than anything, because I grew up in Singapore, right? So I didn't really buy real estate in the US. That was new to me. But I think more than anything, just having the kind of the confidence to do it, I think is the most important piece. Now, in what I do on an everyday basis, I speak to a lot of women. And the thing that they always tell me is I'm so afraid of doing it, right? I think it's the same thing for investing. I'm just so afraid I'll make mistakes. And I think that's one of the biggest, that in itself is a big mistake, that that it feels like you can't do it. It feels, insurmountable. And that's why on my website, I try and show all these women who, come from different kinds of lifestyles. You might be a single mom, you might be right out of college, you might have debt, and because this is an important goal to you, this is something you want to do. It is possible. It's just a matter of, educating yourself to get there.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. Yeah, just building that confidence. And I think, just also training our mindset to believe that it's okay to make mistakes and that what, we'll still figure it out along the way.
Oh, totally. I've made so many mistakes too. Over the past 5-6 years, I've, bought 4 places, and even now I'm still making mistakes. I'm just more okay with making mistakes right now than I used to. I understand the fear. I think it's totally normal, but I also think it's really important for all of us to push each other.
Yes, I love that. So, okay, speaking of mistakes, when you first purchased your first home in 2014, on your website, you mentioned that it was just a mind-boggling experience and process, and you wish you knew more about it. So if you could go back and give your past self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, I already mentioned one of it. I think the just start thing was probably easier for me than most people, but I think really that's the biggest thing that I see, other people get stuck with, right? I think the second thing that I keep saying and hopping on because I truly believe it's true, is to ask for help. I think
Mm.
many people feel a similar thing, right? Like you feel so stuck. It's like, oh, I don't know where to go. I don't know who to go to. And real estate is one of those things where it's still pretty, it might feel like very male dominated. It might feel like only certain kinds of people have access to it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think when you start asking around, people have been so kind and so helpful to me in so many ways that that's something that I feel like I often see other people also not do, is to just literally reach out for help, even to the internet.
Yeah.
Just, put your question out there.
I love that. There's so many, like resources available. So you don't have to like, be stuck and feel like you're in it by yourself and you have to figure it all out by yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get into some pre-home buying tips. What is the first thing people can do to start preparing for buying a home?
So yeah, in my, part of our philosophy is that we think about home buying in like really three different parts, right? I think when many people think of home buying, they think of literally, okay, let me go out there, let me start the process and buy the place. But
Mm-hmm.
there's actually a lot of groundwork that you have to do. So, what I always tell people is like, hey, when you start your first job, you start thinking of retirement, right? Even though it's like 30 years away,
Mm-hmm.
I want to encourage people to think of home buying in a similar way, that when you start your first job, if you actually want to buy a home, let's start thinking of home buying. And that's the first phase of things that we call pre-home buying. So to us, that's everything that's like up to the stage where you start searching for a house itself, but
Mm-hmm.
it really puts you in a good financial position, right? So to your question of what are kind of the tips that we give, one is, and really one of the most important things is like getting your credit score in order. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, kind of like personal finance hygiene. So even if you don't want to buy a home, you should be looking at your credit score.
Mm-hmm.
uh because at some point you might need to take a loan out for whatever reason. So it's just understanding, what are the elements that go behind a credit score, right? Because I think many people think like, okay, I pay my bills, why my score is so bad?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the score is actually an algorithm based on different kinds of factors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about paying your bills, it's about having like a decent length of credit history. It's about having like a low credit utilization ratio.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many elements about it that's not, that I think the the like the actual thing versus the practical understanding of it is so different. And so that's a huge tip that I keep giving everyone. Like, get your credit score in order. The low, the higher your credit score, the better. It means the lower the interest rate that you will get on your mortgage, which
Mm-hmm.
means the lower the cost of your home eventually.
Okay. I love that. Credit score is definitely a big thing. So, okay, so now that we know, what kind of home we want to purchase, we've done our research, we're working on our credit score. How do we understand like how much home we can even afford?
Yeah, so there are some like general financial guidelines that people give, and but I think at the end of the day, that this is still like a really personal answer.
Okay.
Let me just talk about the general financial guidelines first, right? Which is like, there is this thing called the 28-36 rule, which basically says that no more than 28% of your income should go towards housing expenses, and no
Okay.
more than 36% of your income should go towards total debt. So that's like housing, that's like student loans, auto loans, all of that, right? So but in totality, really, it's like 36% of your total income, right? Like, so that's
Oh, so that's including the home, what the home would be.
correct,
Oh,
36%.
okay.
All in. So approximately a third of your total income should go towards like any form of debt expenses. That's very personal still, right? Some people might think like, oh, 36% sounds fine, but when you start doing the calculations, you're like, holy, that's like too much
Yeah.
or that's too little, right? Like, and 36% of someone who's making $10,000 a month is very different from 36% of someone who's making like $3,000 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say at the end of the day, that's like a high level financial guideline. A lot of women that I've spoken to have told me like, 36 feels too high for me. I would like that percentage to be lower. And what I tell
Mm-hmm.
them is, okay, why don't you just write it down? What you'll be willing and able to pay on a monthly basis for housing expenses. And, maybe it can just be exactly what you're paying for rent right now that makes you feel financially comfortable, and that's totally okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like the general maximum that most financial experts would recommend.
Okay. I love that. Just figuring out what you're okay with now. And I think like your first home that you bought was like a 350 square feet. Is that how many square feet it
Yeah,
was?
yeah, it was tiny. I mean, just to be like completely frank, right? Needed like a there was a bunk bed because I needed a space to work, and the place just wasn't big enough for me to have like a bed and an office at the same time.
Oh,
So
wow.
okay, let's do a bunk bed so I can like have my own. But I belonged to that group of people who wanted to be really conservative about how much I could spend. Like I could
Hmm.
well afford to buy a bigger place. I just did not want to stretch myself at that point in time.
Okay, so you're definitely following your own advice and just like buying. And I think it's also important to realize that like your first purchase doesn't have to be like that's the only one you buy. Like you can start small and then
Yeah,
work your way up.
yeah. I was also, like for me, I always knew I was going to buy multiple places. I, knew that like I wasn't going to buy like this big house and just live in it and not do anything else with the space. Like it was
Hmm.
always part of the plan. So like buying a small place was, yeah, it also felt like it made me feel more comfortable making mistakes if it was a smaller amount of money and like a smaller place and some place that I knew eventually I'll move out of.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I do have a question from Instagram.
Oh, cool.
Somebody wrote in and asked, so let me head over there. What kind of cash flow margins do you like to see? And does it vary from like a condo versus a multifamily versus a single family property?
Yeah, I think like once again, there's also the kind of general rule of what most people do, and
Hmm.
I don't exactly follow that because it's really difficult to do in New York City,
Okay.
right? Like let me explain. Let me back up and explain like what the general kind of margins that people like to see.
Okay.
So if you are a real estate investor, generally people like to see what we call like the 1% rule, which is basically 1% of the purchase price is what you should be renting things out for.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the general rule. So let's say you buy a place for like $100,000, right? You
Hmm.
generally want it rent out for like $1,000
Okay.
a month.
Okay.
So that's kind of like what on a high level. But in New York City, that's just not, it's a totally different, and that's where I live. And I don't do out of state investing yet. That's something
Hmm.
that I'm interested to do down the line. But for me, you know, I would say I'm probably a little bit more conservative than like many real estate investors out there, but like, you just got to do what feels comfortable to you, right? And for me,
Hmm.
like what felt comfortable was to own rental units close to where I live so I could, manage them myself. I could like choose my own tenants. I could see what was
Hmm.
going on. But because New York City and especially Manhattan is like such a different ball game, that was just not possible. In Manhattan, um, when you're investing, there are really two ways in which you can make money. One is definitely cash flow, which is like rental you, and the other one is appreciation.
Hmm.
Manhattan is a little bit more, New York City is a little bit more of an appreciation play, in which you're identifying neighborhoods in which you feel like will appreciate over the years. And so for me, like I don't entirely adhere to that rule. I
Okay.
cover my costs and then I go for areas where I feel like they will appreciate, and that has worked out well for me. But I do need to kind of distinguish between what most investors look for in a cash flowing property and what I am doing because of the unique circumstances where I live.
Okay. That definitely makes sense. And then also it's like kind of based on what the rents are around you. So you also have to like put that into consideration too, like the rents in the other neighborhoods around you.
Correct. And that's like why I find real estate so interesting. It's also because it's so local, hyper localized, and so every single market will be different. And so at the end of the day, right, the point of an education is to understand why certain things are being done in a certain way. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it in that way, right? You need to understand the options, and then you need to do what's right for you based on your own personal circumstance.
Yeah, I love that. But I guess when it comes to cash flow, the goal is to at least have, somebody that's paying the mortgage part. And then if
Yeah,
you make a little
100%.
bit extra, if you make like a couple $100 extra, then that's even better. That's awesome.
Totally. I mean, the more cash flow deposit, the more cash flow, the better, right? Like that's always the rule. I think a couple of things to think about though is, one is like what is possible within your vicinity or like your driving vicinity or your range.
Yeah.
Generally, the more urbanized an area, the more competitive an area, like you
Oh,
just
I
want
see.
high return, right? Because it's more competitive. So that's why New York City, it's like super competitive. You're just not going to get that high rental yield. And then secondly is also like, they're just different kind of risk preferences. So there's different kind of tenants that you'll be comfortable with, for example. And so different kinds of like risk preferences. The more risky a purchase, let's say it is, just not the house is not in good condition for whatever reason, right? Like maybe it requires more repairs down the line. The more risky a purchase, generally you also will expect higher returns. And so there's like a risk return preference that people just have to select what's comfortable for them.
Okay. No, I like that. It's definitely, I like what you said about it's based on your personal preference. That's a lot of different factors. So you can't really give a specific response for everyone to
Yeah.
follow.
I mean, I think there's always like this kind of like, what's this industry standard? And then how do you apply that to what you want to do and what you feel comfortable with your own circumstance?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So saving a large amount of money for a home can seem like a daunting process. So do you have any tips for us that can like keep us motivated while we're saving?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing when it comes to saving is to understand, and I get this question a lot, right? Is to understand like, number one, how do you calculate what you actually need, right? Like, calculate the down payment, and to calculate your down payment, it also means that you have to understand what your mortgage options are, because there's some mortgages available to people where you don't have to put 20% down.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you only need to put like 3.5% down. Maybe you have a VA loan, you only need to put 0% down. So firstly, you have to figure that out. But regardless, it's a big amount of money. It's probably most
Yeah.
people's biggest purchase, right? But the other thing about down payments or like saving that's important to consider is, you know, especially now with the coronavirus, like stock market crash, this is really important for people to understand, is
Mm-hmm.
when the markets were going up, a lot of people were putting their down payment in a stock equity account.
Yeah.
But that means you could also lose it just like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and this happened to multiple people I knew. Like the market crashed 20%
Oh
and they lost
no.
20% of the money that they thought they were going to put in down payment.
Yeah.
So it's really important to understand, okay, call it like, I want to purchase a place in 2022 August,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's really important to understand that, like, preferably 6 to 12 months before that date, when you want to start looking, you start putting your money into like low risk um, accounts, like a high yield savings account, or you start putting your money into different kinds of CDs, right? If you want
Okay.
higher. So don't,
Don't like wait till the
don't
last minute to like pull to
don't wait
like
to the
put
last minute. Like that's,
yeah.
I totally understand the allure of like watching the market grow 3%,
Mm-hmm.
20% in 1 year. I totally get it, right? Like that's amazing, but at the same time, the market can also just crash like that. And so really, really understand where you're putting your money, why, what are you getting out of the money, and like how risky or riskless that money is.
Yeah, I love that. So it's like we even have to be smart about diversifying the savings. Like, okay, if you do
Totally,
invest
totally.
it, don't invest all the
Don't
hundred
lose the
percent.
down payment in a pandemic stock market crash. Like
Yeah.
that, a lot of people have learned lessons here, and that's totally fine. We all make mistakes again, but don't lose your down payment in the stock market crash unnecessarily.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great tip. And I don't really hear a lot of people talking much about that. But I'm glad that you were able to bring that up. Okay, so my final question is, when in the when in the process should we be reaching out to a real estate agent?
Yeah, there's no like hard and fast rule about that. I would say definitely like, post getting your credit score in order. you should also probably already have, met with either like a mortgage banker or mortgage broker, preferably, right, to understand how much you're qualified for, because that's the first thing your real estate agent will ask you is like, what's your budget and are you sure you can pay for that
Oh,
budget,
okay.
right? So like if your real estate agent is not confident that you either have a pre-approval or you're able to pay up, like why would they take you to see, like a $500,000 house? And that's understandable. You're just mutually wasting each other's time. If like, yeah, but it's kind of true, right? You shouldn't be
Yep.
seeing $500,000 houses if, you are budgeting for $300,000 houses. You can like for fun, but it's not like the nicest thing to do. To and it's
Yeah.
also just that it's it's going to make you a little bit disappointed, right? So like
It will.
have
I
a
know. Seeing a
yeah,
$500,000
yeah,
house
yeah.
in
I mean, we can
Phoenix.
all aspire to great things. Like I aspire to great things too, but I try to only see things that I can really afford, because that's just me. Maybe that's just me, and I think that's the right thing to do, to be honest and upfront and transparent with your agent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so for me, those are the two steps to really get to accomplish. First is to like look at your credit score, have a really good understanding, preferably by speaking to a mortgage banker or mortgage broker, about what you can afford and what you're qualified to borrow. And then you try and then find a real estate agent.
Okay. I love this. This has been such a great interview. Like, I love the tips that you were able to give us. I love how you broke things down. And I love how, like, the idea of, it's okay to fail and it's okay to start small. This first place that you buy doesn't have to be the final, your final pit stop.
Yeah, for sure. And one reason why I'm like so passionate about this, and this is something that I want to keep talking about, is because for women, there was recently a study done this year. I believe the study was published, that women, when we buy and sell houses, we generally buy houses for more and sell it for less than men. So it's kind of
Mm.
like, in the salary negotiation, right? We tend to just
Yep.
somehow or rather end up with less money, and we can't put it on them. I think we kind of have to put it on ourselves and ask like why, we are not negotiating for more, why, negotiating to buy the house for less, or like negotiating to
Mm-hmm.
sell it for more. So I think like, it's totally okay to make mistakes, but it's really important to also educate yourself, get your grounding, find like your tribe to help you through the process, and as far as possible, ensure that you are getting the best bang for your buck and getting the best return on your money.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, I think that confidence plays a big role, and just belief in self too. I think that, yeah, if we can work on those things, then the world is ours. Okay, so speaking of tribe, where can people keep up with you? Where can we get some more tips from you and just learn more about buying homes in general?
Yeah, so we are on a couple of social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram at Live with Plum. So that's LIVEWITHPLUM. You can find on YouTube. We have a relatively new YouTube channel.
Nice.
Same thing. Also, just YouTube, Live with Plum. You'll find us, and then you can also find us on our website at livewithplum.com. And on our website, you'll find a lot of the breakdown of all the different steps. Tons of information out there. We also have this series that we call Plum Homeowners, where basically, different women are like sharing their stories and their lessons with us, what their background is, why they wanted to buy, what they bought, and their lessons that they learned. So it's kind of like a little bit of like an inspiration, aspiration board, I would call it.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, on your website, it's just like super helpful. You break things down in like an easy way to understand. I did want to ask, like, where did Plum come from? Like, I know I didn't like, what's the
Oh,
origination of that name?
yeah, it's a bit random. It's actually just part of like my name. Not like it's part of like my Mandarin name. So I was just like,
Oh,
coming up with a name for something is so difficult. I didn't want to use my actual name because I don't know, it's not really me. I was just like, oh, I just want to come up with something. But yeah, it's whatever. Like I
okay.
like it, but it took me like 2 seconds to put together.
Got it. Yeah, choosing
But
a name can be so hard. But yes, thank you so much, Justine. We definitely appreciate you coming here and sharing your tips with us. And yes, if you guys want to keep up with Justine, make sure you head over to her website, and just she has a ton of great resources for you over there. So make sure you guys head over there.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Guys, so much for tuning into this video. Again, if you would like to keep up with Justine, make sure you head over to her website, www.livewithplum.com. There are so many great resources for you to check out. And again, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you comment below what was your favorite tip that you enjoyed, and also make sure you share this video with a friend. All right, guys, thank you so much. Until next time, I'm Candice Latham, and I will see you guys later. Bye, guys.